everyone. It is an absolute pleasure to be here with you this evening or this morning, wherever you may be joining from, late afternoon, and Katrine's her
Mhm.
spot on the West Coast. So I'm going to do a couple things first. I'm going to share something in the chat. So if you're joining us live in the Zoom, you'll be able to follow a link. I'll be using a Miro board to guide a lot of this. If you're just tuning in to watch, or you just want to kind of follow along with as I walk through the board, I'll also be sharing my screen. I will do that now, and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about as I go. If you're not familiar with Miro, very quickly, I'll just tell you, once you jump into that board, you can jump in as a guest. And once you jump in, you'll be able to move your cursor around and see things. I'll pull you to wherever I am whenever I start a section, but you'll be able to follow along. The important key, if you're going to participate with some of the activities we do tonight, is to use the letter N. The letter N allows you to create a new note, a new sticky note. Over on the left-hand side, there's a button that also will do that. But a couple times throughout the presentation, I'll ask you to create sticky notes with some thoughts in them. You can just double click on those sticky notes to edit them, add text. And so that'll be a way that we can communicate together. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in, and I am sharing my screen, but I'll go ahead and zoom in here to the beginning. And by the way, this is Inspector Gadget themed. So those of you who remember the old cartoon, Inspector Gadget, it's a great fit for what we're doing here. We're inspecting our retros, and I'll get into why Inspector Gadget makes this a great theme a little bit later. So I'm going to go ahead right now and snap everyone's attention to where I am, because I want you to come and see this first portion. This is going to be our learning objectives and our outline for tonight. Over on the left-hand side, you're going to see a section that says, what do you want to get out of our time today? That's my question for you. What are you hoping to take away from here? And we have a great audience here. I want to make sure that I address maybe some of the issues that you have, some things you're looking for. So if you wouldn't mind, I see some people already doing it. Excellent. Go ahead and drop in a sticky note over there. Like I said, it's as easy as pressing the letter N and then clicking the screen, and you can drop a sticky note in. Just start typing. I'm going to type something, something, and something. So feel free to create some sticky notes. We'll check those here in just a second. But as you're putting those in, I'm going to point to our learning objectives. We're in the intro stage right now. That's the first 10 minutes of this talk. Then we're going to do a retrospective overview. And then we're going to talk about 5 phases of retrospectives. And maybe you've never heard of the 5 phases. There's a fantastic book written by Esther Derby and Diana Larson, Agile Retrospectives. It goes in depth into that. There's some really good articles online too, so you're welcome to just Google the 5 phases of retrospectives. But that's what we're going to use as our outline. We'll spend 10 minutes on each of those phases, and then we'll do an outro, which hopefully we'll have Q&A. We'll have time to go into that as well. So I do want to point out that as we go through each of these, my goal for you, aside from getting what you want at a time, and we'll look at those in just a second, is to really think about what the retrospective ceremony can do for you or is doing for you. I'll just say at a high level, I find that people are kind of in one of 3 camps. Maybe you came and you said, look, I'm already doing retrospectives, help me do them better. Great, hopefully we can help with that. Or you might say, I'm doing retrospectives, but they've gotten stale, getting old. I don't know if it's a really good fit for me. We'll have stuff for you. Or maybe you say, I tried to get people to do retrospectives, or we're not doing them right now. How do we get started? Hopefully we have some stuff there for you as well. Our runtime, we are going to go for 90 minutes, well, a little less than that now. So we've got a lot of content to cover. I'm going to do my best to present it as clearly as possible. I do sometimes speak a little bit fast, so if you're losing me, that's what the recording's for. You can go back and watch it at half speed. That should make it a bit easier to follow. So I'm going to quickly glance at what we want to get out of our time today, and I'm going to hide people's cursors just so that I can see a little more clearly. New ideas for engaging the team. You want to make virtual retros better. New ideas to improve involvement. New ideas how to keep my team engaged. New retro ideas, bring the retro into the agile mindset, increase virtual engagement. A lot of people want new ideas, which is great. We're going to cover several. And then as you ask questions, I can maybe even add a few more to that. And then tactics beyond the basic. Online retro's biggest bang for your buck changes. Great. These are all very good. So before I jump into my content, I'm going to slide over here to the right. You're welcome to slide over here with me. What are we doing here? We're welcoming. We're getting into the tools. We have the meeting agenda. Oh, I'll talk about session feedback in a second. Let me quickly introduce myself, and then I'll show you the area for feedback. This conglomeration of pictures is me. So I am the Director of Community and Retrospective Evangelist at Retrium, but I want to tell you really quickly how I got to Retrium. It's a great journey. Some of you have your own Agile journeys. Maybe you've been on it for a week, maybe you've been on it for 10 years, 15 years, but everybody has a journey of how they got to where they're going. My journey starts down here in the bottom left-hand corner at the Department of Energy. So I was working with them, I was doing development. I was a happy little developer writing code. And I went from there to this company called Sabre. And while I was at Sabre, a manager asked me a very interesting question. He said, look, you write code today. Do you want to become a great coder or do you want to become a manager? And to be honest, I was very torn. I was like, I don't know. My goodness, do I want to go down the manager path? Do I want to go down the developer path? I don't know what to do. It was at that time that I was introduced some of the ideas of Scrum, and specifically this book right here, Coaching Agile Teams by Lisa Adkins. If you haven't read it and you're interested in anything Agile, I can't recommend it enough. The Scrum Master who introduced it to me said, this is like my Bible. I carry it everywhere with me. Wherever I go, I have this book. I got to attend that class with Lisa Adkins. She had that class at the time she was teaching. And from there, I said, you know what, developer or manager, I want to be an Agile coach. And so that set me on a journey. I was able to be a Scrum Master there at Sabre. And then I went on to start a group called Coaching Agile Journeys. It's an online meetup group, kind of like the Agile Experts Club. And then I also have worked with the Open Leadership Network a bit. I found myself most recently at AIG, being an Agile coach there. I did some Scrum Mastering work, eventually moved into a transformation coach role. And then from there, I've recently been at Retrium for the last 6 months or 5 to 6 months, and I'm absolutely loving it there. So I am a retrospective evangelist. So I am passionate about retrospectives, as hopefully you'll be able to see from my talk. Now, right over here on this to do on my intro, there is this thing called session feedback. And anytime you see a pop-up at the top right of one of these buttons, you'll be able to see that it's a link. There is a section on our board for session feedback. And I'm going to go and click on that link. It snaps me down here. Down here, you see session feedback. And what I would like is as we go, think about this, because I want at the end you to make a sticky note for what you loved, what you learned, and what you would change for next time. If you have any recommendations for me changing it. If you want to capture a question and you don't put it in the chat or something, you can make a note, put it over here on feedback and questions. We will come here at the end, and this will be where we wrap up over here in session feedback. All right. Okay, that being said, we're going to jump into our content with a retrospective overview. I will stop after each one of these sections for questions, except I'm not going to stop at this section because, hopefully you don't have questions about me. So let's jump into the content. All right. Oh, wait. Before I do that, you wanted an activity. I'm going to pull us up to the top here. Go Gadget, this section up here. So if you follow me up to Go Gadget, it's going to be at the top of the board. What happens up here at Go Gadget, I'm going to go ahead and unhide it. And I want to show you an example of breaking the ice, getting some activity going, and specifically themed retrospectives. One of my friends that I have on LinkedIn, Chris Stone, is amazing at creating themed retrospectives. He has Lord of the Rings retrospectives, he has Star Wars retrospectives, he has James Bond retrospectives, and the theme really kind of gets those creative juices flowing and makes it kind of fun. So for example, if you were going to be hosting a retrospective and you wanted to take one thing from this talk and go apply it right away, I would say go to your team in your next retrospective, and whatever tool you use, however you communicate, whether it's a Google Doc, whether it's you put stuff in chat, ask them this question, say, hey, the first part of our retrospective this time is going to be inspecting our retrospective, and it's going to be just like Inspector Gadget. And so kick it off with this, Go Gadget. What is it? It's a simple question. It says, hey, over here on the left, there are all of the things, and not all the things, there's a lot more than this, but several of the things that Gadget in the TV show would say, Go Gadget hat, Go Gadget ear, Go Gadget coat, Go Gadget arms. There's all these different things that he did. And even if the person doesn't know what Inspector Gadget is, you can explain it's this like semi-robot, semi-person cartoon character who solves crime, but it was a comedy. It was a very funny show. You could say, imagine if you could say Go Gadget and then something, and it gave you like a superpower. What would you want? And these are just primers here, right? So Go Gadget shoes, your shoes could turn into ice skates or roller skates, or they could have jets on them. Go Gadget belt, your belt could pop out and help you, shoot a wire across a ledge and you could climb across it. And so what you do is you have your team, and I'll ask you if you're on the board to go ahead and do this, create a sticky note over here in the My Favorite and say, what kind of Go gadget would you want? And so I'm going to make me a big one up here, right there. I'm going to, by the way, snap everybody to me again in case you're all over the board. I'm going to bring you back up here to me. So what would you want? So let's say I want Go Gadget hands. And so you have everybody put something out here that says, what is it that they want? And again, if you're on the board, you can go ahead and put one out. And why are we doing this? This is totally random. This doesn't make sense at all. This is a retrospective. We're supposed to be talking about getting code better, making teams better, better communication. What's this doing? It's shifting the expectation. It's shifting the expectation. So I see people starting to put sticky notes out there. Let me ask you a question. When you come into a meeting, right? Whether it's probably a virtual meeting or maybe an in-person meeting, what are you expecting at work? I'm not talking about a meeting at home, you're meeting your family, you're meeting a friend for dinner. I'm not talking about at work. You walk into a meeting, what do you expect? Hopefully, you expect some kind of an agenda. Someone has something to talk about. We have to solve this problem. We have to talk about this. We have to get there. And so you sit down and you have your notebook and you have your pen and you say, okay, I'm going to learn something. I'm going to add to this meeting. It's going to be business. I'm going to get business done. What you're doing in a retrospective, if you do something like this, look at these answers coming in, you're shifting the perspective. Huh, that's interesting. What do I want out of a retrospective? You want to go past the business end of, oh, we got to get stuff done. And you want to kind of probe into the people. And so what I would do with this is I would have my team do exactly what you're doing, throw them out there. And then I would just say, team, look at these and see if there's any that are interesting to you, right? And this can happen in the Zoom chat or whatever. They'd look at them and maybe the team goes, that's interesting. Someone wants gadget eyes. That's interesting. Well, yeah, let's talk about that. What would gadget eyes look like? And so what's happening here? All of a sudden, we're talking about things, not the official business agenda, but we're talking about things in a creative way. We're engaging a different portion of our mind. And what it does is it starts to open people up to what comes next. This is the idea of an icebreaker. An icebreaker's intention is to break the ice and to pull you out of your normal day to day. I'm doing all this stuff. Oh my gosh, so much stuff to do. And it brings you into a place where you can be creative and you can actually think with a different mindset and get into deeper things. So Go Gadget, I love those. We don't have time to talk about them. Thank you, everyone who participated. I'm going to scroll down into the first section. And so that's just something you could do to kick it off. And you can use any theme you want. Pick a TV show, pick something the team likes. If they like music, if they like whatever, use that as a way to start introducing your retrospective topic. So let's talk real quick here on this retro overview. Why do retrospectives matter? Well, hopefully you're here at the Agile Experts Club. Hopefully you have some idea of why they matter. If we're going to be agilists, if we are going to be people who are responsive to our changing world, which I don't know if you've noticed, we have a massively changing world. If you're going to be someone who responds to that, you've got to inspect and adapt. Okay? So you've got to look at what happened and you've got to say, let's change so we get better results the next time. A retrospective is the opportunity to turn around and look back, not at what you've produced. A lot of teams are good at looking back at what they've produced, right? So you've got the boss says you got to make 15 whatever widgets. You got to make 15 of these. So you make 14. You look back and you say, did I do what I was supposed to do? No, I was one off. I made 14. I was supposed to make 15. Next time I'll make 15. Okay. That's what you're producing. What you're doing in a retrospective is you're looking at how are we producing? How did we get there? What decisions did we make as we made those? How did we fall short? And when could we have noticed earlier that maybe we're going to be one short and maybe get that one more? Where do we have breakdowns in communication? Where do we lose time that we could save in the future? So all kinds of things like that. So retrospectives matter because they enable you to improve your process for delivering something. And doesn't matter what you're delivering. Maybe you're in legal, maybe you're in HR, maybe you're a developer, maybe you're in manufacturing. It doesn't matter what you're delivering. Examine your process and look to improve it. That's what happens in retrospectives. So what is a successful retrospective? It's one that you come out and you have at least one action item to be an experiment for your next iteration. So if you were to go in a room and talk to people for however long, and we'll talk about how long retros are supposed to be in a second, but if you come out with one experiment, I think if we did this, it would make that better, then I would say you've had a successful retrospective. And you say, just one? I mean, that we need more out of a retrospective. We need documentation. We need to show that we did something. We need whatever. If you can improve 1% each iteration over time as you go, you're going to see increasing returns as you go forward. Now, the goal obviously is to improve more than 1%. But if you improve 1%, what do you do next retro? See if you can improve 2. See if you can improve 4. See if you can, do you see how this works? And you continue to improve over time because you're training yourself to focus on ways to improve. Now, facilitation preparation. If you're facilitating a retro, which some of you may be here and say, I'm just a participant, I just come. Let me tell you, if you're just a participant or if you are a participant facilitator, you need to model engagement. You need to be confident. You need to do whatever it takes to feel safe in the retro. You need to show people this is how we come together in retrospect. That's if you're a participant. If you're a facilitator, you need to prepare the way for your people to come. And what do I mean by that? I mean, and I'm sorry, I'm guilty of this. I've been there and I've done that, where I look at my watch and I go, it is 10 minutes until a retrospective, and I haven't prepared a thing. That is not the right way to run a retrospective. Honestly, the right way is to, during the iteration, take notes, maybe have your team help you. Hey guys, if you see anything we should talk about in the retro, let's put it on a sticky board or let's capture it somewhere, so that when the time comes for the retro, you're not starting from scratch. What do you guys want to talk about? You have something prepared. And the more time you put into the preparation, the more rich your retrospectives will be. I can tell you from experience, when I spent more time in preparation and I did things like themes, and I did things like I had the board all set, or I had handouts, or I had a game ready, when I did my job as a facilitator and prepared, we had much, and I mean much, richer conversations. It got a lot deeper than if I'd have just showed up and said, all right, guys, we got to do things better. What'd you do that you want to get better? What'd you do that worked? And just ask some template standard questions. So you want to make sure you're prepared. So how do you do that? So you say, hey, okay, I'm a facilitator, I want to prepare. Right over here, 5 phases. I'm going to unhide this. There is an arc to retrospectives. Just like if you're a coach or you're interested in coaching, there's an arc to a coaching conversation. This actually comes from Lisa Adkins, this arc of coaching conversations. And what it means is when you're talking to someone and taking them through a process, you want to take them step by step through a framework. Why? Because if you go into a room and you say, all right, guys, what are we going to do to get better? They're going to look at you and go, do stuff to get better. But imagine if you walk them through these stages. Stage number 1, set the stage, right? We're going to prepare for what we're going to talk about. Number 2, gather data. Okay, we're going to get information. We're going to figure out the details of what it is we talk about. Number 3, generate insights. We're going to probe and we're going to see, hey, what are some ideas we have? How can we maybe work with this? What can we do there? Decide what to do. So critical. Decide as a team what it is you're going to do, and then close the retrospective. All of these are critical steps, which we're going to go into detail here. But what I'm telling you is you're going to lead them on a path that you will be shocked by the results. Most of the time, when I talk to a group that is not having good retrospectives or has given up on retrospectives, those don't work. What I find is they are using a very simple template every retro. Every retro they come in and they ask the same 3 questions, or they fill out the same form. One team I was with, the scrum master was talking to me and said, I just can't get participation in retrospectives. And I said, wow, well, let me help you. Tell me a bit about your current retrospectives. Well, after a sprint's over, I send out an email with 3 questions and ask, what can we do better? And I don't get responses anymore. I used to, but I don't now. Do you see a problem with that? They were sending out an email asking what the team could do better and just reply to all. That's not a retrospective, right? So let's go into what a retrospective is. Let's actually get into some of the meat of this and explore a little bit deeper what it is that can be done. By the way, before I move on, I have some notes here, some icons, and they're mainly there for me to remember to share with you. Hey, which of these can be done remotely, and how would you do them remotely? And then how would you do them in person? Hopefully at some point we'll have the opportunity to be in person again, but we'll talk about remote versus in person, some of those ideas. And then which of these work small, as in I've got 5 to 10 people, which of them work there, and which of them work at scale? What if you have 100 people on 10 different teams, right? Which of them work at scale and which of them work small? So these icons are there as we go through that. I want to make sure I mention ways that you can change them as we go through. All right, so that is the overview of the retro. I'm going to pause for a second and look at the chat. Does anybody have a question right here? I see the chat. I love it. A question that I can maybe answer. Oh, please send the mirror link again. I can totally do that. Oh, someone did it. You guys rock. Just scrolling through. Don't see anything. Don't see anything. Great. No questions? Then we'll press on. Oh, absolutely. And here's what's happened. We'll be able to save this Miro as a PDF. I'm going to leave this link and this Miro open. So after it's all said and done, you can come back and actually pull down these images. You can grab screenshots, take any of this board that you want, copy the whole board, whatever you want to do. You should be able to do that. If you have any problems, you can just email me. My email's on the board. You can just send me an email. But I'm going to leave this board up as long as I'll just leave it up. So that link will be good. You can get back into it and pull stuff from it. So, all right. Okay. Let's move on to phase 1. All right, so we're at phase 1 of a retrospective, and we're doing good on time. So number 1, what do you do when you're opening up a retrospective? So phase one is setting the stage. And why do we want to set the stage? We want to set the stage because the environment we create is critical to the results we're going to get, right? If you have an environment that is rushed, you have an environment that is distracted, you have an environment that's not conducive to people sharing ideas and discussing, what's going to happen? You're not going to get the results that you want. So you want to create the environment. Now you would say, what environment do I want to create? That's a great question. I'll leave that up to you and your team. What environment could you create that would be the most conducive to having a successful retrospective? Now, remember what I said a successful retrospective was? It's one where you and your team come out of it with one good experiment that everyone agrees on that you can try to see if that improves your team over the next iteration, right? Go for that one action item, one experience. If you can come out of a retrospective with that, then you are moving in the right direction. So I'm going to show you 4 ways that you can set the stage, 4 ways that you can get the conversation started. All right. So the first one here is one word. What is one word? One word is incredibly simple. Please use one word to describe the last iteration. Oh, we have someone who's not muted.
Excuse me, can you please mute your mic, please?
There we
You
go.
can't really hear what's going
Yes.
on.
Thanks. Awesome. All right. I think I got everybody muted now. Fantastic. If you're not muted, go ahead and mute, but I think everyone is. So what is one word? I apologize if you missed any of that last portion. I'll just step back and say it's important on your retrospectives to create the environment that's going to make your team successful. Okay. So let's start. Imagine you all walk into a room, 93 of you walk into a room, and I say, we're going to do a retrospective, right? How are we going to do this? How are we possibly going to do this? One thing I would do is I would ask you all, I would say, hey, let's use one word to describe the last iteration. Now, up here at the top, remember we have scaled and we have small group. If we were a small group, I would say to you, hey, you guys just create a sticky note and put it on here, right? That's what I would do if we were a small group, but we have 93 people on the call. So what do you do with a larger group? An app like Slido would do the trick. If you click on this word right here, you can click on that link, Slido events, or you can go over here. Slido is a free tool that enables you to do things like run a poll. So I'm actually running a poll right now inside of Slido. So if you click on that, I've already got 6 people responding. You guys are amazing. Let me drag this over right here. So I put a poll out there that said, hey, what do you use one word to describe the last iteration? And so what Slido does is as many people as want connect to it, and they can put their answers in. And then this particular poll is a word cloud. And so imagine all 93 of us put an answer in here, and you can click on that link and go in and put your word in. We've got 6 so far, but this would populate dynamically, and you could sit there as a scrum master and imagine we're in a retro with 100 people, and you could see words pop up, and you could say, okay, here are words that describe the last iteration. Now, do you dive into these? Let me tell you what my favorite thing to do is on an exercise like this, where you're working with a team and you just have them put out words, right? Use one word to describe the last iteration. What I would do is I would say, team, look at these words. What stands out there to you? And let the team kind of look at them and peruse. And who knows what stands out to them? Maybe as the coach, I'm like, man, I really want to talk about amazing. The retrospective is not about me. The retrospective is about the team. And so if the team says, that one lonely, boy, that one really hits me. I'd say, okay, let's talk about that team. Why does lonely stand out to you? Why does that hit you? You're getting conversation going, and you're doing it in a way that obviously is different than your typical meeting. All right. So Slido is a great way to do this at scale. Or like I said, if you have a board or a Google Doc or something like that, people can just put in words that they can just drop in, and you can see them show up there. If you just have Zoom, just have them put the word in the chat, right? One word to describe the last iteration. I love this. Oh, by the way, that's can be done remotely or in person. In person, you just use sticky notes. The favorite, my stack is gone. Here we go. The favorite tool of coaches. Just give everybody a sticky note and say, write a word and then stick it up on the board if you're in person, right? So this can work with large groups, small groups, in person or remote. The next one is incredibly similar, but slightly different. Clean language. If you haven't heard about clean language, I highly recommend you go check it out. The link is there in the bottom, cleanlanguage.co.uk. The idea is to create a sense of what is this like? If the last iteration was a vehicle, movie genre, book, grocery item, celebrity, living quarters, place on earth. What would it be? You get all kinds of answers from this. And notice you're not telling them, what was your coding experience like? You're telling them if the, and one of my favorites, if it was a vehicle. If the last sprint was a vehicle, what kind of vehicle would it be? And then just let them answer. Some might say, oh, it was a rocket ship. Cool. Why was it a rocket ship? Oh, we were on fire. We were flying a million miles an hour. Someone might come back and say it was a pair of roller skates. Why was it a pair of roller skates? Oh, we were just, every step was hard. It was just tricky to do. So it's the same thing as one word, but it allows people to kind of create analogies. And in those analogies, you can probe them and say, why would you say the last iteration was a horror movie? Right? Or why would you say the last iteration was a comedy? And you're starting to probe things. Again, what's happening is you're taking people out of that typical mindset that they would get when they go into a business meeting. I love this one, constellations. In person, if you've never played constellations, it can be so fun. All you have to do is have some object, any object. If you're ever in a room with 10 or more people, play constellations, right? You throw an object down and you have everyone stand in a circle around it. And you simply say, I'm going to make a statement. And then if that statement is true for you, you go up and you stand close to the object. And if it's false, you go stand further away from the object. And so your proximity to the object indicates how true it is. So that's great in person. It's so much fun in person. What do you do virtually? Well, in Miro, or if you have a board or something similar to this, what I do, and I've actually done this with several teams virtually, is I create these prompts up top, and then I have everyone make a sticky note with their name on it. So I'm going to hit sticky note. You don't have to do this. I'm just demonstrating, right? So here's Isaac going to put that there, and then I'm just going to put another sticky note in, and we'll just call this Bob. All right, so Isaac and Bob are here, and you'd have all of your team members. And what you do is you drag one of these down there. I'll just say Marvel over DC. You drag it to the middle, and you say, if Marvel over DC is true for you, move your sticky note closer. If it's not, move it further away. And then what I challenge you as a facilitator, don't interpret this. Ask the team. Say, team, looking at that, what do you see? I'll tell you, teams laugh. They have fun. They joke with each other. Travel over home time, right? Do you want to travel more or do you want to be at home? Your proximity, oh man, I am a traveler right there. And maybe Bob is a home person. And you say, team, what do you see? One person I had took their sticky note and literally threw it off the screen. And it's like, so you really don't like you prefer home time. And the person's like, oh, 100%. After you've done a few of these prompts, if you have time, let the team create some prompts. And that's what happened if you were playing in person, by the way. If you're playing in person, after a few prompts, you would say, who wants to go? Someone create a true or false statement, and we'll move closer or further away based on what it is. So that's constellations, amazingly fun, works remotely if you have a tool, something that you can spatially see distance on. Also works in person. By the way, one other thing, if you're using Miro and people have accounts, or Mural, and you can see their mice pointers, you can see them moving around and you can see their names. You could do this without the sticky notes. You could just have them move their mouse pointer close or far away. In person, I told you it works. You just throw an object on the ground. Small groups, this is great with. Larger groups, it would work, but it would get messy, right? So I wouldn't do this with more than 20 people. If we tried to do it with all 100 and I ask you guys to put sticky notes there with your names, this would get out of control fast. So I'd recommend probably not trying this at scale, but it works for small, even to medium-sized groups. All right, moving on. Last one here. Icebreakers or team radar. I'm going to reveal this. So icebreakers. Sometimes, or oftentimes, people say, well, where do I get icebreakers from? Range, if you've never heard of Range, they're a great tool. They have this awesome tool called Icebreaker, where you pick a category and boom, they drop in some of these icebreakers, and you can just click through them, pick a random one, and ask your team, hey, team, what do you think about this icebreaker? Get the answers from them. It's awesome. I see a comment there. With what you've shown, are these serious issues we're presenting, or are these more icebreakers? Everything I'm talking about right now is in set the stage. Everything I've covered so far is preparing. I would only spend the first 5 to 10 minutes of your retro prepping the team to get outside of their mind and to think creatively. So this is not the retrospective. If you do icebreakers from Range, or you do constellations and then say, retro's over, bye guys, you failed. Remember the goal of a successful retrospective. You got to walk out with at least one experiment that the team can try to improve the next iteration. If we come together, play constellations, and then leave, we failed. So this is just preparing the team. It's the warm-up, getting them out of their day-to-day, the business, the humdrum. It's saying, hey, this is sometime we're going to be creative. We're going to have fun. Let's come together and let's start the retro on a bright spot. There's another one here, Retronym, and I'm just bringing this up because actually, if you're virtual, this is a fantastic tool. One of the things I used to do when I was in person is I would have everybody vote. So I would give everybody sticky note and I would ask them questions and then have them vote in private, and they would fold their sticky note up and then they would give them to me. And then I would put them on the board. This is a this, this is a this, this is a this. And then I would say to the team, show me what you see from that. Inside of Retrium, you can do a retrospective on a radar. And I love this. And this is something that I would not, this is not the retrospective. This is the prep for the retrospective. And so there's a link on that board. You can click on that link and it'll take you over to this board that I've set up. And all this is that people can put in, I'm going to move to the next phase. And if you jump in here, if you click on that link, you could jump in here. All they have to do is say dedicated workspace. As you're just working from home, how satisfied are you with you? I'm that satisfied. Tool reliability is pretty poor. Team collaboration is great. Task clarity and focus time. You can have as many people as you want in this room. And very quickly, like literally 45 seconds, if you share a link, people can jump into the tool and you can see where everybody's at. It is a very quick way to take the temperature of a team. And so, again, this is not the retrospective. This is warming up to the retrospective. So all I'm going to say is all these activities, don't just stop with these. I mean, you could do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then start over and do them again. But I would say use these as a launch pad to find some other fun activities for your team. Only do one. I would only recommend one at the beginning of a retro. Don't do 10, right? You need to get into the meat of the retro, but do one and make it quick to launch the retro and make it fun. Any questions on the set the stage before we move on? You can put them in the chat. I'll just take a look over there, see if any come in. That was a great question, by the way, Arturo. Thank you for asking that one. Excellent. I don't see any more questions there. So we'll move on to phase 2. Love it. You guys are a great audience, by the way. Thank you, everybody who's following along and tracking with me. Oh, yes, I have a question. Fire away.
Yeah, can you please tell a few of the icebreaker question, 1 or 2?
Oh, no, I'll do better than that. I will show you this range because, I could tell you 1 or 2, but let me just open up this range link. When I found this, I said, I'm never going to create an icebreaker question myself again. Takes you here, you just hit start and you get the category. It says, hey, do you want intro for new teams, tricky for tight knit teams, or tough? Time to get real. Let's just say I went tricky. I got a mid-range team. I go tricky. Boom. Icebreaker question right there. How do you recognize when you're stressed? Oh, that doesn't fit my team very well. Okay, cool. Next question. Boom. Who was your favorite teacher and what made them special? Guys, there's over 300 questions here categorized into these 3 areas. You can change the difficulty. If you say, we need harder questions, go back, change the difficulty, tough. This is so helpful. I would have this bookmarked so you could pull up an icebreaker anytime you need it. Man, for the holidays, if you're spending time with family for the holidays, have this on your phone, pull it out and say, hey, everybody, let's answer this question. What's one deadline that you almost missed? And just get people talking. So right here, 300 icebreakers. If you click on this link, there's a link you can click in the top corner, or you can just Google icebreaker and range, R-A-N-G-E. You'll find this site, icebreaker.range.co. You get over 300 there. So that's way better than if I gave you a couple right now. Yeah.
Question?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, do you just stick to one, or you can use different tools for what you are talking about?
Great question. I would find what works for your team. Don't get stuck doing the same. And I'll give you a great example, right? Retrium, just as a tool, and just because I know the tool, Retrium there's about 8 templates for different radars you can use. So let's say I have Retrium as a tool and I use template number 1, and then next retrospective, I use template number 1, and then next retrospective, I use template number 1. That's not going to get the same results. Even if you stick with the same tool, you need to find ways to mix it up. I would not play constellations every retrospective. Maybe you play it once a quarter, once every 2 months. So find what tools are available to you, see what you have available, and then mix it up. Don't get stuck in one tool, one method. Make sure that you have a variety. Variety is the spice of life, and it helps keep retrospectives interesting. So definitely don't get stuck on one tool and one method. Make sure that you're mixing it up. If you're in one tool, like Miro, for example, mix up the activities that you're doing, right? So keep it fresh. Don't let it get stale. All right, we're going to move on because the clock says to. So the next section is about gathering data. All right, so gathering data is the phase. So now we've all come together and we've had fun. We've done an icebreaker. We've got our brains thinking. Hopefully everybody's smiling at this point. Please let your team smile. Help them smile. Have fun. So now we're having fun. We're in gather data. So now we switch over into work mode. And so the first question is really, hey, what are we going to talk about? And don't ask your team that. Don't say to your team, hey, what are we going to talk about? Guide them through thinking about things that they can talk about. There's a never ending pool of things that you can talk about. Guide them through it. So how do we do that? Top row right there. Define the scope. Don't let the team talk about things that happened 3 years ago in a retrospective. That's not going to help you today. Don't let the team talk about the VP's new car. That's not going to help you in your next iteration, right? What you want to do is define the scope. Here is what we're here to talk about. Let's talk about this scope together. So define that scope and don't get lost. Don't let the team wander here and there. Hey guys, let's stay on topic. We're looking at the last 2 weeks, specifically at that deployment that kind of failed. What do you guys think about that deployment? Let's dig in that space, all right? So don't get lost. Allow anonymity. If your team doesn't have psychological safety, which hopefully you've heard that phrase before, if you haven't, Google it. That means that people feel safe. They feel like they can share their topics. I'll tell you, if your team is sitting around doing this and you say, team, let's talk about this deployment. What happened? And the team just goes, nothing. It's okay. No problem. Your team is shut down for some reason. You need to explore and understand why that's happening. Very possibly they don't have psychological safety. What I do in that case is provide anonymity. Find a way for them to share, hey, we should talk about when that code blew up in production without having to say it in front of everyone. Give them anonymity. Now, don't give them anonymity just so that everyone's always anonymous. Hopefully your team matures where there's enough safety that they can have conversations out in the open. But maybe at the beginning, as you're developing that psychological safety, you want to create some anonymity to allow people to share how they really feel. There are some really interesting psychological experiments about people. There's one, and I forget the title of it, but I just recently came across this, where they did a study about 30, 40 years ago, where they put people in a room and they asked them, compare this length of a line to 3 or 4 other lengths of line and tell us which one that's the same size as. It's a very simple task. You look at the line, you match it with A, B, C, or D. The only thing is there was only one participant and 4 actors. And what they did is the 4 actors said, oh, that's definitely B, definitely B, definitely B. And when it got to the real participant, they went, oh, definitely B, right? Until all the actors at the same time got it wrong, right? So the length was A, and they said C. And the next one said absolutely C. And the next one said absolutely C. And the last one said C. The real participant in the study, knowing it wasn't right, over 50% of the time would go with what the group was saying because they didn't want to upset the balance of power in the group. That's why sometimes we need anonymity. You need to give people the opportunity to say how they really think without everyone in the group going, what? That's not what we think, right? So maybe provide some anonymity there. And then create interesting and creative probes. So ask them questions, but don't just ask them broad, what do you want to talk about? Ask them creative probes about certain specific areas of the last retrospective. So focus on something. Focus on the team's communication. Focus on the office conditions. Focus on the tools the team uses. Focus and probe into those areas to help them pull out the things that they want to talk about. You want to look at intention versus reality. Remember, you're not just looking at what the team produced, but how did we think we were going to work? We thought those guys were going to get step 1 done, and then it was going to be easily handed off, and then these guys were going to help us, and then this was going to happen. Did that happen? Yes or no? If we're really good at predicting the future and what we planned actually happened, great. That's a great retrospective thing to discover. Most of the time, though, especially with new teams, you make a plan, here's how we're going to do it, and then something happens along the way and things get messed up. So intention versus reality. What happened that we didn't expect, and what didn't happen that we did expect? Let's dig into those a bit. Have them put up sticky notes on the wall, right? And again, don't get in a rut. Don't get stuck with asking one question, one style of retrospective. Again, find those creative probes to ask them this. Down at the bottom, I've got 4 of the very common ones. You can Google these. These are incredibly common. Most people put up columns on a wall, put up columns in a tool. Mad, sad, glad. What made you mad this retrospective? Go put a sticky note on it. What made you sad this last retrospective or this last iteration? Go put a sticky note there. What made you glad? And so people would, sit down, they'd write on their little sticky notes, this made me sad, this made me glad, and they would go stick them up there. And just like with the one word before, you would ask the team, what do we see up here? Same thing for start, stop, continue. By the way, start, stop, continue is the greatest rut I see teams get into. They ask those 3 questions every retrospective. What do we need to start? What do we need to stop? What do we need to continue? Next retrospective, what do we start? What do we stop? What do we continue? Don't get stuck in that rut. What went well? What didn't go well? Or the 3 L's. I liked this, I learned that, and I loved this. Liked, learned, or liked. This last iteration lacked this. I liked this and I learned this. These things all work remotely, although you need to be careful about anonymity. It's a little bit harder to create anonymity remotely than it is in person. In person, you can just have people, like I said, fill out a sticky note, sheet of paper, fold it in half or something, and then blind vote or blind submit their answers. A little bit harder online. There are some great tools out there that enable you to do anonymity online, but just be aware of your team's psychological safety, and that it's a bit harder remotely unless you have access to a tool that allows that. And then small groups, all of these things work well in small groups. If you have to scale, if you have a lot of people, 25, 30, 50, break up into small groups and then do what's called a liberating structure. I don't think I have liberating structures further in here. You can Google it. Liberating structures has this idea of small groups talking and getting bigger. So it's called 1, 2, 4, all, right? So you as an individual sit and think about what you want to talk about. Make 3 sticky notes about things you want to talk about. Okay, I'm going to pair you up with someone else. You guys compare your notes and decide what 3 things you both agree on you want to talk about. Now we're going to put you in groups of 4. You 4 get together, compare all your notes, decide what you want to talk about. And you have this bubbling up idea. You can do that all the way up until you have, if I was doing that right now with all 94 of us, that's exactly what I would do. I would say, let's open up 10 breakout rooms. Everybody go in your breakout rooms, talk about what you think you should elevate, come back with one thing. We'll pair up some breakout rooms, and then we'll do it again, and we'll eventually get to the top 3 or 4 things everyone wants to talk about. If you have tools, some tools allow you to do dot voting really easily. You can put up ideas and then people can dot vote on them. A lot of ways you can do it, but work to get to the themes that the people want to talk about. That's what we're doing here in the gathered data area. Let me move on to Lean Coffee. I'll hit the rest of these and then we'll pause for questions. Lean Coffee is a wonderful way of having a meeting. This is not to take the place of your retrospective. This is for a portion of your retrospective. So I would not do Lean Coffee for an entire hour if I had a retrospective. I would do Lean Coffee for a portion of the retrospective. And I'm going to move on because I'm a little bit behind. So I'm going to try to speed up here. Sailboat. Sailboat is another great exercise. You have this image. If you were in person, you'd put it up on the whiteboard. Virtually, you'd put this image somewhere. You'd ask people to apply sticky notes to it. What is our goal and our vision? What are the rocks and the risks that are keeping us there? What are the anchors that are holding us back? What is the wind that's helping blow our sailboat forward? What you're doing, this is actually a coaching trick. What you're doing is you're taking what would be a scenario that's in front of someone that you could ask them to describe. Hey, tell me what your problems were this last sprint. The code didn't work, this didn't work. What you're doing instead of asking really straightforward questions is you're asking them to mentally step to the side and get a different perspective. If we were on a ship and this ship was headed towards our goal and our vision, what's the anchor that's holding us back? What is it that's keeping us from going full speed ahead? What are the things that are blowing in our sails that are moving us forward? If you have a team brainstorm on this, there's some pictures down here of a team that I was with that was doing this. They did it in person. We had the sailboat up on the whiteboard, and they filled it with sticky notes. Filled it. So how do we talk about this in retrospective? That's where I would go into dot voting. I would have some way for the people to vote for which of these they think is the highest value, which of these is going to bring the best return. And then we would take whatever it is that comes out at the top into the next phase. All right, so that's a sailboat. If you're going to do it over scale or virtually, you need some kind of a tool to do it. If you're doing it in person, just draw it on the whiteboard and use sticky notes. Works with a small group. This one, where there's so many sticky notes all over the boat, this one had 30 participants in the room, right? So you can do it with groups. It could get even bigger, but then you run out of sticky note space. So you can use it with larger groups, but it gets a little unwieldy. Again, I would break the groups into smaller breakout rooms if I had to do it at massive scale. The last one I'll share with you is timeline. Timeline is you put this up. You say, okay, here's the beginning of the sprint, whether it's a 2-week sprint, 1-week sprint, however long your sprint is. Here's the beginning, and here's the end. Everybody on the team makes sticky notes that events that happened during the sprint and put them, if they were amazing events, so someone came along and gave us code 3 weeks early, that's an amazing thing. When did that happen? Oh, that happened right at the beginning of the sprint. You know, we got code Awesome. Put that up there at the amazing portion. Or what if things went bad, right? So a manager talk, right? So the manager came in and yelled at us all and it was terrible. And then they gave us extra work. That was crushing. And that happened about halfway through the sprint. What's going to happen is as people put sticky notes up here, they're going to find here's the high points, here's the low points. And then again, you as the facilitator don't interpret this. Say to the team looking at this timeline, what do you see? What can we take away from here? What do you want to talk about more? And let the team start probing and digging in to the individual items. Again, they can dot vote, or you can allow them the opportunity to talk about ones that bubble to the top. So the idea of all of these exercises, and there's so many more, but all of these, timeline, sailboat, lean coffee, and all of it is to gather data. What are we going to talk about in this retrospective? Ideally, you'd have 1 to 3 things that the team feels like they can talk about and get into in the next phase, which is generate insights. I'm going to pause very briefly. I need to move on to phase 3, but I'm going to quickly look at the chat. Thank you, someone, for putting the Liberating Structures link out there. The retro formats, are you saying that perhaps rotate them occasionally, not to get stagnant? Absolutely. Retro formats should be rotated. Don't get stuck with, I'm going to use Mad Sad Glad every time. I would, if I was going to use these 3 and not use any of the other things, lean coffee or other things, I would use Mad Sad Glad 1 retro, then I would use what went well, what didn't go well, then I'd use start, stop, continue, then I use 3 Ls. The idea is that I'm not approaching it the same way every time because the team will get stuck again in that rut. So you do want to avoid that. Idea boards works. Love the sailboat exercise. Great. How long do your retros normally go for? I love that you asked that question. Thank you. That is a huge question. What I do, and again, I'm a retrospective evangelist, so I love retrospectives. As you can see, I have a lot of ideas for how to lead the team through that arc. I take as long as I can get. And unfortunately, the trend I've seen throughout my career has been most teams begrudgingly will give you 1 hour. They'll give you an hour and they'll be frustrated about it. That's not ideal, right? You can make it work in an hour, but you got to be on point. You got to be quick. You got to be snapping. You got to be saying, all right, guys, time to move on, time to move on, time to move on, which kind of stinks because you'd love to linger in some of these. If your team finds gold in the icebreaker, if they start having really rich, this is the experiment we should do, conversations at the beginning, you want to be able to step back and give that room to breathe. But if you only have an hour, you kind of got to keep things on track or you won't get through the whole cycle. So it's a lot harder with less time. I probably wouldn't go longer than 2 hours with a team, an average scrum size team, 7 to 10 people. I wouldn't go more than 2 hours with them unless I was doing a workshop or something. So 1 to 2 hours, but I'll take as much time as I can get because I feel like I can add value the more time we spend in a retrospective. But you need to show the team that too. You're adding value. The time you're spending is time well. I love that. 1 hour and a half is the sweet spot. That would make me very happy. 1 hour and a half would be great. 90 minutes, you can do a lot in that. All right, guys, we got to move on because I'm looking at the clock and I'm like, so I'm going to start talking faster and moving on a little bit quicker, but keep your questions and don't forget them. We'll have that time at the end. I'm going to give us time for Q&A. So hang on to them. If I don't answer them or we don't have time to answer them here, save them for the end. We'll have this whole board. We can come back and revisit them as we go to the Q&A. All right. Next up, we have discovered what do we want to talk about. I've given you some tools to probe and say, what is the thing that we as a team feel like we should talk about? Grab that 1, 2, maybe 3 items, bring it into the next section, generate insights. This is Gadget with his magnifying glass saying, let's dig a little bit deeper into this. We need to understand what is causing this. So ask the team, all right, let's take the top one that you guys talked about, this thing, whatever thing is, and say, let's start digging into this. Where did this come from? What happened to it? Why is this here? Begin digging in to the data and the causes. So one great way of doing that, some of you may recognize this concept, is called the 5 whys. I'll go ahead and zoom in on this. The 5 whys is just that easy. You pick your first thing. Okay, so team, you said that when the manager came in and talked to you, he yelled at you, and then he gave you extra work, and that really messed things up, right? Why? And then they'll tell you, here's why that was a problem. And then you just keep asking why. The example I have here, the problem, users don't use the search feature. So you ask why. Hey, why don't they use the search feature? Well, they don't use the search feature because they don't know that they can. Okay, why don't they know that they can? Because they're not interested in the feature. Well, then why are they not interested in the feature? Because they don't. And so follow me. I'm not going to go through all these, but you just keep asking why. Why is that a problem? Why is that a problem? Why is that a problem? Until you get down to the point where you say, you know what, we've gotten to a root that we might be able to do something about. What often happens is teams say, the manager came in and yelled at us. That's a problem. Okay, let's go tell the boss's boss to tell that manager not to come in and yell at us. Maybe it's that simple, but often it's not. Often there's something buried a few layers down. And if you just take the first thing that someone says is a problem and go wielding an axe trying to cut down trees, you're going to find yourself in a bad situation. So spend the time, this is what the retrospective's for, and dig in, understand what the data is telling you. Understand what's possible. What can we do to maybe solve this? And don't just take the first answer. Spend some time, create space, allow some silence, allow the team to think, what would I do if I had the opportunity to improve our relationship with our manager? What would I do if I was trying to make sure that our code reviews got done in time? What would I do if I was trying to ... right? So give some time for people to think what's possible and to dream about their ideal future. Another way of breaking down, hey, what is it that we can do here is called a fishbone diagram. I don't know if you've seen this. Fishbone, you can Google it. You put your problem here at the beginning, and then you say each of these spines that come out from the fishbone is an area, right? So our problem is our code didn't deploy. What was involved in the code not deploying? Well, one thing was the DevOps team messed up. What else? One thing was we failed a bunch of tests. What else? Well, we got our code in late. What else? Well, and so you look at these things and you break down the causes. Why are we doing this? Why are we digging in and trying to peel apart the data that we found in the previous level? The reason is because we want to get, remember a successful retrospective, we want to get an experiment that we can take back and we could try. So this is the point where you're getting the team to start digging and handling and playing with the problem, to understand it, to truly realize what it means, so that you can create an experiment. Those of you who remember hypotheses and experiments from school, right? We hypothesize by doing a thing that we will solve this problem, right? Clearly articulate what the problem is, which will have these benefits. We think this will get better as measured by this measurement. Have the team work on that and say, okay, what could we do to maybe address this challenge, right? So the code didn't deploy. We had the fishbone diagram. We had the 5 whys. What can we do to maybe affect that? And let's come up with an experiment that we could maybe try based on this data. So now you're actually asking the team to not just think, but to think creatively to come up with a solution that they can apply to this problem. So I would spend about, if I was using, let's just say an hour, right? I had an hour, 60 minutes. I would spend my first 10 on the icebreaker. I would probably spend 15 on gathering data. And then I would spend 15 on this next one, trying to dig into it and generating insights. Gathering data and generating insights are the meat of your retrospective. They are where the thinking happens. They are where the talking happens. They are where creative ideas flow. So 5 whys, fishbone, and hypotheses and experiment. Again, I will pause just for a second to look at the chat and see if there's any questions I could quickly ask. The whys would annoy my team. I've been there. Yes, make sure you explain to them why you're doing the whys, otherwise it can get annoying. I miss having teams that talk. Teams that don't talk, it's easy to just say, they just won't talk. We as facilitators need to find ways to make them talk. And what I would recommend, if you have a team that will not talk, you can't get meat out of them, spend most of your time on the icebreaker and the close. Why do I say that? Because the icebreaker is safe. I can talk about if I like cats over dogs, no problem. Get your team to talk about things that are safe, and then begin to segue that into things that may be more dangerous. Nobody wants to go into a retrospective and feel like they just lost their job because they said something that's going to get them fired. Talking about cats and dogs probably shouldn't get them fired. If they disagree with the CEO of your company, cats over dogs, probably not going to get them fired. So start with safe topics and then try to move them into more real topics. It is okay to use a few of your first retrospectives to try to build up that psychological safety in the team. It's a good investment for you. Do you have an export this data maybe into a Word doc? Oh, how do you export this data? So totally all about how you're capturing it, right? If it's on a whiteboard, what I would do is I would take a picture of the whiteboard in person. If it's in a tool, if it's in Miro, I would just download the PDF. If it was in Word doc, like if we were all editing a Word doc together, you can just download that. Make sure, however you're capturing this information, especially generate insights and gathering data, make sure you have some way of exporting that so that you can go back and revisit it later. Again, this is the meat of the retrospective, what you're taking out. All right, what if gathering data doesn't lead to the obvious issues you need to talk about? I have a question. Obvious to who? So yes, the team may be distracted, right, by the manager came in and yelled at me, and you might be saying, we can't do anything about the manager. We need to focus on the code quality. Be very careful as a facilitator, agile coach, scrum master, in pointing the team where you think they should go. Now, I'll tell you as a scrum master, I definitely moved teams in a direction, but I did it, if you think with like guardrails. And if the team feels like, hey, there's something over here that's interesting, and I'm like, no, there's something over here, allow the team some of that flexibility, because they will support way more a decision that they feel like they came up with than one that you came up with. If I came into a retrospective and we had 100 people in the retro, I said, all right, retrospective time, your problem is that you are not showing up for lunch on time. And that's the end of the retro. What are you going to do to fix not showing up for lunch on time? This is not going to be a productive retro. It's not even going to be a conversation. So be very careful in how you guide the team. Again, it's okay for you to provide guide rails, but don't feel like, well, the team is talking about this, but I think this is the issue. If you've done gathering data and generating insights correctly, for some reason, something about what the team wants to talk about is resonating with them. Now, can you do anything about it? I'm about to talk about that in my next section. We'll talk about that as a separate thing. But I would say let your team have a little bit of freedom to explore the things they feel like is holding them back and see what results come from that. So be very careful about putting your own expectations. If the team just did this and this and this, they'd be fine. Allow the team to have some self-discovery in that space. So give them a bit of space for that. Great questions. I've got to move on. Save any extra questions you have as we go back. I'm going to address that last question actually in this first one with circles and soup. So now we get into decide what to do. So we've generated ideas, we've generated insights, but now we have to decide to act, okay? And when I say we, I don't mean you, the scrum master, the agile coach, the facilitator. The team needs to decide what it is they're going to do, right? So the team has to take ownership of this because they're going to be the ones doing it. If you have a retrospective only to get out the things your scrum master is going to do, you're missing the point. This is a team effort to improve the team. Some impediments only the scrum master can handle, some only the product owner can handle. But generally, you need at least one experiment the team can influence. Okay, so don't just be looking for things that people outside the team need to handle. Be looking for things the team can handle. One amazing exercise to do that is called the circles in the soup. Absolutely, you should Google it. Absolutely, you should use this. When I have found teams that have been stuck, circles and soups help me get through it. What is that? It's this idea that the middle circle, the small circle, is something that you have control over, something that you directly influence. So for example, I have a team and that team says, we are not starting our stand-ups on time. That's our biggest problem. Our stand-ups always start 5, 10, 15 minutes late. When we do the 5 whys, why do they start late? Because not everybody's there. Why is everyone not there? Because they haven't dialed into Zoom. Why haven't they dialed into Zoom? Because they didn't try dialing in until 5 minutes after the meeting started. This is in the direct control of the team. The team can decide, I am going to show up on time for my daily stand-up. That's a team decision. That's something they directly influence. That's good. The team can go run an experiment. Hey, let's try starting our meeting at a different time, or let's try all committing to being there on time, or let's try, they can create an experiment and do something with direct influence. What about something the team can't directly influence? What about something like the start time of your workday? The team says, the problem is that we have to be logged into the Zoom meeting at 8 o'clock. That's a problem. I have to go drop off kids at school and then I have to run by the gas station on the way back. I can't do that every day. And so the best I can do is I can get in there at 8:30. But the manager said you have to be at your terminal logged in at 8. Well, the team can't just start showing up at 8:30. Oh, we decided we're going to show up at 8:30. Your manager's not going to be happy. What do? You influence the manager. Someone on the team, or Scrum Master, facilitator, someone on the team would go to that manager and say, hey, manager, here's our situation. We talked about it, and here's some challenges we're facing. Is this something we could maybe address? So it's something you can influence, right? So maybe the person responds positively, maybe they respond negatively, but you're trying to influence them. It's not something the team can turn the key and change themselves. And then there's the soup. The soup is the outermost circle. It is beyond the influence of the team, right? So someone on the team says, the problem with our team is that we have to work on PC systems. I want to work on Mac systems, but we have to work on PC systems. Well, if the entire company, works on PC systems and you're at a large company and that's what procurement has procured, and you can't change that. And you can't even influence that. You can't go talk to someone to change the strategy of your company, right? So that's beyond your influence. So while you can recognize things in the soup, you can say, this problem we're talking about, that's in the soup, isn't it? You need to recognize spending time digging into things that are in the soup is a waste of the team's time. Why? Because they can't impact it. It's beyond impact. You can't change that there's only 40 hours in a normal work week. You can't change that there's 5 days. You can't change the realities of your competition in the marketplace. You can't change your stock price, right? So sitting in a retrospective talking about your stock price is a waste of time. You need to recognize what is something you can indirectly influence and ideally what you can directly influence. Now, I worked with a team one time that was a little more mature. They'd worked together well, they'd overcome several hurdles, and they said, you know what? All of our problems are outside of our influence. Everything we can either indirectly influence or it's in the soup. And I did the circles and soup with them, and they put all their problems outside of them. There was nothing indirect influence that they could do themselves. Everything is everyone else's fault. You know what I told that team? I said, team, then it's time for you to increase your influence. What does it mean to grow up and to become more mature? If you think about it for a second, when you're a kid or a child, you don't directly influence a whole lot. You directly influence your toys. You directly influence the food you're eating at the table, but you don't directly influence what gasoline your parents put in the car, right? But as you grow up, what happens? As we mature as adults, as human beings, our direct influence should increase. The benefit of going out on your own and becoming your own person and having your own bank account and your own car and your own job, you're increasing what you directly influence as you mature. So tell the team it's the same thing. Team, if everything is outside of our influence, it's time that we grew up. And the team might say, well, what do you mean by that? That means it's time that we mature where we start influencing more. So the question becomes, how do we increase our circle? So if you don't have anything in that circle, if everything the team wants to work on is outside in the soup or in the indirect, the thing you need to work on as a team is how do we increase our direct influence? And they might say, I don't know. Well, how do we make relationships with managers? How do we go ask this team if we can bring that process into us? How do we do X, Y, or Z to bring things into our circle so that we can improve them? Because sometimes maybe your team has improved everything inside their circle. If they've matured and they're a much stronger team than they were when they were young, there's always something you can improve. And if you've improved everything directly influenced by you, it's time to expand your circle. It's time to grow up and impact more things. I'm going to move on to this last one here. I'm just going to really reveal it and move on 3 by 3. This is an action item, Simon Tomes, some silent brainstorming techniques. You can look at that and read it. I am pushing on time. So I'm going to come back here. I'm going to look at the chat and take maybe one question from I see it. Excellent. My team usually wants to talk about everything on the board, no voting or sorting the data. Yes, and they would have things like, we did not have enough sleep. Use circles and soup to help them focus, right? Take every one of the things they identify, put them on a circles and soup board, and just say, if there's plenty of stuff in the things we can directly influence, let's not talk about indirect and beyond our control. Let's start with the things we can control. Also, don't let your team talk about everything. You will always have more ideas for improvement than you can actually implement. You're not going to come out of a retrospective with 8 things to improve. You're not going to come out with 7 or 6 or 5. I recommend no more than 3 things to improve, 3 experiments. Why? Because you have a day job. If the team was given time to focus, 20% of their time to focus on improving their processes as a team, yeah, you can do more. Most of the time, 99% of teams I work with aren't given that time. In fact, I'm fortunate to get an hour to do a retrospective. So if you don't have the time, don't try to commit to a lot of things. 1 to 3 experiments is about all I've seen teams be successful with. If you're a new team, start with 1. We're going to make one thing better. And the team says, but wait, we have so many great ideas. Okay, show me you can do 1, and next retro we'll do 2. Show me you can do 2, and next one we'll do 3. Help the team be excited about things they can improve, but don't let them take on too much because they still have their day jobs. There's only so much improvement we can do when we're not given that time specifically to improve. And if you only have your 1 hour for your retro to work with your team, you need to be realistic about what you're going to get done. One of the worst things you could do is try a whole bunch of experiments and have none of them work, right? Start with 1, 2, or 3. I would say no more than 3 to get them done. All right, I've got to move on. Save your questions. We're going to try to get to the end and have questions. Last thing, close the retrospective. Do not leave your retrospective after you've decided what to do. Okay, we've decided that we are going to, so-and-so is going to go talk to a manager because we think if we talk to that manager, it's going to fix the situation. And these 3 people they're in charge of the testing engine. They are going to try to change the testing procedure so it runs twice as fast. Okay. Don't leave at that point. That's not the end. You need to finish the retro with a closing. Why? Because there's still information you need. Like what you say. Number 1, retro on retro. Who owns the retrospective? I know as a scrum master, a facilitator, an agile coach, you're like, that's my meeting. That's definitely, I feel a sense of ownership for the meeting, but I feel ownership for its success. The team owns the meeting. The ideas generated, the content generated, the discussion that happens is owned by the team. So ask the team at the end of the retrospective, save 5 minutes, save 10 minutes. Say, team, really quickly, how was this retro? Was it effective? Did we do what we needed to do? Is there more we need to talk about? How would we do it better next time? Have them give you some quick feedback before you close it. If they're shy, have them put it on sticky notes. When I was in person, I used to put a poster board on the door or by the door. And I said, everybody, before you leave, I ended the meeting 5 minutes early. Before you leave, write down one thing either you liked or that you think I could do better in our next retro. Write it down, stick it on the doorway as you leave. Here, you can have people email you. You can have them put it into an anonymous document. You could do a poll question inside of Zoom. You could do a poll question in Slido. Get feedback on how the retrospective was for the team so you can improve the next retrospective. And if you're just a team member, the team should be asking itself that. How can we get better as we go? Retro on retro. Give the team space to celebrate. If something good happened in the last sprint, don't just sit around focusing on all the things that are broken that we need to do better. Celebrate the things that went well. Save the last minute and say, hey, anybody having a birthday? Hey, anything really good happened? Hey, you know what? When so-and-so helped so-and-so, that was awesome. Let's give them a round of applause. Celebrate the team and their wins. Save some time to do that. Team appreciation. Let the team appreciate each other. Team, really quickly, I'm going to give you 45 seconds. Call out a person and something great they did. And the team might be frozen. 45 might be a little bit tight. But ask them to say, I appreciated it when so-and-so helped me write my code. Hey, you brought me a coffee that one morning. I appreciated that. Hey, you sent me that email reminder. I would have forgotten if you hadn't sent me that. Thank you for that. Right? Give the team space to do appreciation. And then lastly, document. You want to write down what it is you're doing from there. Who's doing it, what the experiment is, what the outcome's going to be. Write it down. Why? So in 2 weeks or whenever your next retro is, you can ask the team, what was our expectation and what was our reality? Our expectation was we get 50% better. What was our reality? Did we get 50% better? Write down your goals so you can revisit them. I love this quote from Danielle Laporte. She says, when you declare and share your goal, your action, what you're going to do, you are now accountable and helpable. If I write down that so-and-so is going to do this thing in the next sprint to help the whole team, now it's all written down, poster board, email, bulletin board, team page, whatever. I can help them now. I know that's on them. They're doing it. They're doing it for us, the team. I can help them. Also, they're accountable. Their name's on it. It's captured somewhere. Write it down. Lastly, I would tell you, checkout. If you've never done a checkout, it can be really cool. Because what have we done this whole time? We started with an icebreaker. We're closing with a checkout. What I'm trying to do is help you create insulators on this meeting. So the team recognizes when we're in a retro, it's different than when we're in a normal meeting, when we're going through normal life, right? Checkout, what is that? You just ask them, team, where are you? What are you taking from here? What did you experience? Everybody use one word. What was this retro like? If this retro was a car, what was it like? Give the team an opportunity to check out of the meeting and finish and say, everything we did in that retro, there it is on the table, locked and loaded. Now we're ready to move on from there. There's a whole page down here for checking in and out. You can go look at that link when you want to. I realize I'm in my last outro, so I'm going to close with this. It takes a team. Team is everybody, right? Who is your team? Is it a coach, community practice? Who's on your team? Recognize that everything we're doing in the retro, for it to be successful, you need to know who your team is. I'm not saying to include everyone in the org. Your team are the people who are working together to get whatever the product goal is you're working on together as a team. That's your team. Make sure they all have a voice. Make sure they have an opportunity to speak up in the retrospective and to talk. If you've never heard of the Prime Directive, I highly recommend opening your retros with this. Regardless of what we discover, we understand, truly believe everyone did the best job they could, given what they knew at the time, their skills and abilities, the resources available, and the situation at hand. This can help create psychological safety. Oh, I could go into this long one. I'll just say this. If your manager or a leader who can fire someone insists on being in the room or on the call, you're going to have lower psychological safety. It's called the manager's gun, the invisible gun effect. Your job, if you're going to have a rich retrospective, is to create a place of safety where people can come in, say how they feel without feeling like they're going to get fired for something they said. I've got some extras in here. I don't have time to talk about them. These are just some resources that I use really regularly and highly recommend. I would say you should check those out. So here's what we're gonna do. That was the outro. We're moving over into Q&A. So I'm gonna bring my screen all the way back over here. And I'm going to ask, I'm gonna look at the chat. I'm gonna ask you even now, we have, how much time? We have 16 minutes left. Yes, that was what I wanted. I'm gonna ask you, if you wouldn't mind, as a participant, if you're on the Miro board, and I will share the link again, I would love for you to share a piece of feedback in this, what I loved, what I learned, what I would change next time. And I'm going to invite you to go ahead and do that now as we're doing Q&A. Notice what I'm doing. Anybody notice? I'm closing the meeting, kind of like you would close a retro, right? I'm asking you to give me feedback so I can improve it for the next audience whenever I do it. So stick some feedback up there. But at this point, I'm going to pause for other feedback and questions. If you can't put it in the chat or unmute and share it, you can put a sticky note on the Miro board if you're in the Miro board. But I want to pause now for questions. I covered a lot of ideas and I didn't get to all of your questions, so I apologize for that. Let's do some Q&A. Who has a question? I'm going to read the chat while I ask you guys if anybody has a question. Prime Directive, whatever happened in Vegas stays in Vegas. Those Vegas rules, those are good. A tech lead is always in on my retro. That can be challenging. And sometimes, listen, sometimes that a manager or a tech lead coming may be part of the soup, right? It may be something you can't even influence. I was in an org where that happened. If it's something you can influence, though, see if that's something that you can maybe start having conversations, maybe even with that person, and saying, hey, when you're in the room, sometimes these things happen. People don't talk as much. Would you consider giving me 1 or 2 retros not in the room so I can compare and see if the team changes while you're there? Let's run an experiment. Maybe try an experiment with that person. Right. I think that, how do you put a sticky note? Just hit the letter N on Miro and then click on the board. You can drop a sticky note and edit it. I heard someone unmute. Did someone have a question they wanted to say in their words?
Yeah, I think that was me. This is Sarah. So I'm a Scrum Master. I'm a fairly new Scrum Master. Been here just about a year. So there are some other Scrum Masters on my team who are very, what I would say, forceful about things. Mm-hmm. And I'm a pretty laid back person just in general. And I feel like a Scrum Master, you kind of need to be laid back, right? You want the team to figure it out, but you want to coach them through, what needs to happen. So my question, and I've posed this to both my teams, is, should the Scrum Master participate in the retrospective?
Fantastic question. That is a super great question because the Scrum Master is a part of the team. And I think the answer to that, and I'll cite Lisa Adkins again, she talks about in coaching agile teams, this idea of a lean agile practitioner. And I will find the link for you. But the idea is that as a coach, you want to be able to wear multiple hats. And there's 4 that she calls out. The 4 are, you want to be able to be a coach, you want to be able to be a mentor, you want to be able to be a facilitator, and you want to be able to be a teacher. And those are all very different hats, right? When you're teaching, you can be forceful and say, this is what you do, this is what you do, this is what you do. But sometimes you need to be a coach. And a coach does not come in and tell people what to do. Sometimes you need to be a mentor. And feeling out the right time to wear a hat. I'm actually just now, I'm reading a book right now on the 1-minute manager and high performing teams. It is an ancient book, very old book, but it talks about this idea of situational leadership, of seeing what is the maturity level of the team and allowing that to inform how you respond to them. And as I'm reading it, I'm reconciling what he's talking about in situational leadership is what Lisa Adkins was talking about of wearing one of those 4 hats. And so what I would say is recognize that at different times, the team is going to need a different stance from their scrum master. Sometimes if they're a mature team, they just need you to facilitate. They need you to kind of set the stage, open the room, and let them go. If they're a young team, they may need you to do some training. I've had teams where I spend the first 15 minutes of my retro doing a scrum training because they're all brand new to scrum. So I would cover something about scrum that I observed during the sprint. They weren't following the scrum guide, and that's what they were trying to do, but they just didn't know. So I would spend the first 15 minutes doing a training. So there's my trainer hat. But then I would shift hats for the last 45 minutes, and I would be a coach. And I would let them kind of guide, what do we focus on, what do we improve? So I would say as a scrum master, recognize there are different hats that you can and you should wear. And the real skill, I think, in great coaches, great scrum masters, is knowing when to do one of those things. I get really frustrated. I've had some agile coaches that were trainers before in their previous job. They got scrum certified and now they're scrum masters, but all that they do is train. All they do is train all the time. Like that's all they do. They would go into a retro and they would train. They would go into a daily stand-up and they would train. They would go into a planning and they would train. And all they did was train. And it frustrated me because the team didn't need that much training. They needed a coach. They needed a mentor. They needed a facilitator. So I would say play around with that idea of different hats and wear the right one for where your team is. And recognize that it may change. Maybe this sprint, they need more of a mentor. Maybe next sprint, they need more of a coach. And it's up to you as the scrum master, as a great scrum master, to wear the right hat to be what the team needs. So I hope that helps. And I'm going to try to look for that article from Lisa Atkins about the Lean Agile practitioner. So
great. Thanks, Isaac. I appreciate it.
No problem. My pleasure. All right. Any other questions? And I see some popping up here. Well, here, let me just read this one. What part of the retro do you save to check in on the last retro's action items before the icebreaker? That's such a good point, and thank you for calling that out. You do, if you're having a retro that follows a previous retro, you absolutely should check in on the items. The thing you need to be careful about is that very quickly that can turn into, well, why didn't that get done? Well, let's solve that. And all of a sudden the team starts solving why they didn't do what they said they were going to do last retrospective. So where would I put it? I would actually put that after the icebreaker because that fits, I feel like, really well with the gathering data, right? So gathering data, we're trying to figure out what is it we're going to talk about. If we committed to 3 action items, experiments out of the last one, and we only did 1 successfully, or we did 0, I would put that in as gather data and then ask the team, is that something that would be more fruitful for us to talk about than some of these other things? Why weren't we able to complete the experiments we completed? Or maybe they say, you know what, that was a fluke. Everybody was on holiday, on vacation. We just did a bad job making up those experiments. We'll do a better job this time. Let's pick another topic. So give them that chance here alongside other topics to decide if they want to dig into their success or failure in the last series of experiments and action items I had out of the last retro. So I hope that helps that one there. Any other questions?
Yeah, so in a bigger platform, in a bigger portfolio level, I think maybe having a mini scrum team, maybe having a different retrospective meeting at different team levels. So how we as an enterprise agile coach need to share the best practices of one team so the team can not only learn from their own mistake, but they can also learn from others' mistakes. Right?
Super great point. Yeah. So number one, you want to be very careful to respect the safety of the team, right? So what you don't want is a team being very honest and open, and then their kind of raw feedback being shared all over with the rest of the enterprise. And especially if their feedback was, well, the DevOps team really blocked us. You don't want, hey, everyone, the DevOps team really blocked this team. Well, now the DevOps team is upset and mad. So you want to be kind of careful about what gets shared, but you absolutely want to create a repository for the takeaways that they feel like can be shared, because you're looking for themes. As someone at the enterprise level, you're looking for not just team level challenges. What you should be looking for, because at the enterprise level, keep in mind, your area of direct influence should be a lot bigger than the team and the individual scrum master. And so what you need to be looking for is, what are the themes across 10 or 50 or 100 teams that if I apply an experiment for my next sprint, my next iteration, whatever that is, what are the themes that I could maybe change that would enable all 50 teams to get better? So you're honestly at the enterprise level, you should be listening very closely to the things that people influence, right? And you should be trying to increase the circle of influence, indirect influence for the teams, right? Because the reality is a team has direct influence really only over themselves. But at the enterprise level, you're coming along and saying, hey, what is it that you wish you could change that I can change, right? So the team, you should be picking up the things that are themes across indirect influence as they bubble them up so that you can solve that across the enterprise. So number one, be careful about sharing too openly a challenge that one team is having that they might not want it to be shared or might cast them in a bad light. Maybe you need to do it anonymously. You want to find a way to do that. But then the goal of raising those, again, is I'm looking for themes so I can help lots of teams instead of just helping one or two. And then honestly, if the teams have a win, if you have a team that had a problem, ran an experiment, and then saw a great result, they should want to share that with other teams. My hope is they would. Incentivize them, celebrate them, say, hey guys, we're looking for success stories of teams that had a retro and then came out with an amazing improvement, and we want to celebrate them. Who has a story like that? And have people submit that to you. Give them awards. Say, hey, we're going to award this team for run an experiment, complete an experiment. We're going to award this team for really great improvement, or the pat on the back award. Come up with something to get them to share their best wins, and then you can elevate those and promote them to the audience. Since they're sharing them, now it's safe because they know by sharing them, this can be shared with the wider audience. So I would strongly recommend considering some of those ideas. By the way, I found that article from the Agile Coaching Institute, and I will put that in the chat, and I will also drop it into the board in case you come back to the board later and want to look at it. So I'll just put that in the answer area. All right, 5 minutes and 30 seconds. I have time for a couple more questions. Oh, let me look at the chat here. See if anything. Coaching, mentoring, facilitating, teaching, often referred to as the four stance of a coach. Thank you, Brian. Can we share with our Scrum Master peers? Oh, okay, great question. So again, you want to respect your team's sense of trust. You don't want them feeling like you go sit around the campfire and talk to other coaches. But I would say in the abstract, absolutely. If you're a Scrum Master working with other Scrum Masters, hopefully you have a Scrum Master community of practice. Great place to say, hey, I tried this in a retrospective and it worked. How do you know if it worked or not? Again, you're looking for success. Did the team come out with one experiment they can try? And then did they do that experiment? But then number two, you're asking the team for feedback during the closing. If the team comes back to you and says, Scrum Master, that was the best retro I've ever had. Man, take that retro and go share it with your other Scrum Masters and say, guys, this worked. It resonated with my teams. Maybe you should try some elements from this with your team. It's not a promise that one over here I can just stamp out success, but maybe you can try some of these elements with yours. Absolutely share ideas that work, share things that are successes, share that information in your Scrum Master community practice. Do share it with your peers. Again, just be careful about the psychological safety of the team. You don't want them feeling like they can't trust you. That'll shut down your retrospectives pretty quickly. Oh, someone on LinkedIn who shares great retrospective ideas. What's his name? Great question. I'll pull that up for you. Thank you, everybody in the chat. People have to go, but thank you for coming. Put an action item in Jira. Oh, look at this right at the top. Chris Stone, highly recommended. The Visual Agile Coach. And actually, this top post of his is him sharing, it looks like another retrospective idea. He, get a copy of the virtual. Yeah, he has all these retrospective themes that are excellent. Chris Stone, this is a Friends retrospective. How cool is that, right? Your team is bored of retrospectives, have him go do the Friends retrospective. You can copy this from his website. You can copy this down into your own Miro board if you're using Miro. I mean, the guy is incredibly creative. Highly recommend his stuff. It's really good. All right, any last questions here? Oh, I see one popped up here. Toughest room I've been in, everyone agreed there was nothing to improve. Yes, and or they were quiet by nature. I love this question. I've tried different things, but curious how you would initially crack the nut. So here's my recommendation. I've done this several times when teams start thinking, oh man, I got this down. I grabbed the Scrum checklist, and specifically it comes from Chris SE. I'll copy this and put it in the notes. This is a checklist Chris put out that said these are the things that teams do really well, right? If they're Scrum teams. So can I zoom in? There we go. Right, the bottom line, they delivered working software every 4 weeks or less. They have clearly defined product owner. Print this out or put it up on your screen and walk your team through this. And if they can check all these boxes, then yeah, they're the bee's knees. But my experience, when I show this to a team, they can check 5 to 7 of these. And they open their eyes and go, man, we have a ways to go, don't we? So find something like this, make one yourself. And it's not to beat the team up. You're not trying to beat up a team, but what you are trying to tell them is you're not there yet. All of us have room to improve and grow. I'll put this in the chat of Zoom too. All of us have room to improve and grow. And so let's talk about ways we can do that. If they're quiet, sometimes people don't like speaking up. Again, that's where I would spend more time in your icebreakers, trying to get them used to talking, get them practice in talking. I promise you there's something that every person would like to talk about. Normally it's themselves, but if not themselves, their kids, their family, their hobbies, things they're interested in. Find what that is and get them talking, and then try to transition that over into talking about work. And then if they all clam up, go back to talking about fun stuff, and then try to transition it into talking about work again. Play with that balance until you find one where the team can start actually talking openly. All right, we are at 1 minute and 30 seconds. I have time for one more. I can answer one more question really quickly. You guys have great questions, by the way. And again, this board and the link are going to be out there. You can visit it all you want. I'll put it in the chat one more time. So just save that link, and you can jump out here. Feel free to take screenshots, download PDFs, whatever you'd like to do out there. What retro did you conduct that led to a positive outcome? Absolutely, most of my retros where I got the team to do 1 to 3 experiments. When they tried to do more, or when they didn't commit to something, or when they said we're perfect, those were not productive. But the ones that were productive is when they committed to 1 or more experiments and then went and did them. And when that happened, the team got better. Sometimes by little, sometimes by a lot, but it made them better. And that's really the goal of a successful retrospective. Add action items to Jira. Yeah, put the action items where the team will see it so that they know to do them. And if the team works out of Jira, putting them in Jira actually is really helpful. Now you need to think about if that'll impact your burn down. You think about that impacts your estimates, anything like that. But you want to put your action item out of your retro into somewhere your team's working so they see it and it's visible. If you were in a team room in person, I'd put it up on the wall, put a big poster up of we are going to do this. And then once the team does it, you can take that down and put up the next one. But yeah, make it visible where the team works. Any games you use? I use a lot, and I don't have time to go into that. I'm so sorry. We're right at time. I use a lot of games. I'll tell you what, hit me up on LinkedIn. I have a lot of games. I would be happy to share them with you. Honestly, I look for what does the team need? What does this retro need? And then I try to use a game that fits that need. So I couldn't just give you a library of games. I kind of go and pick and choose the games the team needs. But I've got a lot of bookmarks of games on the web, and I've got a lot of documents on my computer for games. So hit me up. I'd be happy to share with them.